All right, so on this homework help video, I want to do this whole first problem, and there are some, I will tell you with some of the other ones, there's some things, some data might be left out or some information might be left out. So some of your answers, would be, I can't exactly tell that they didn't identify a sampling method or whatever. So do be aware of that. In fact, on this first problem, truly, I think they would have been better. It would have been better, and maybe I should fix this for next year, if they started out with this statement. And so we're going to put this in so that I can give you a good full answer on everything. Suppose researchers, actually I spelled that wrong. Okay, so suppose researchers thought that, claim that only 25%, suppose researchers claim only 25% of adults think drinking and driving is a serious problem. Adults think drinking and driving is a serious problem. So you can tell then that they're talking about all adults and that kind of thing. So then it says, so then research is a serious. So then researchers stand outside a bar that they had randomly selected from a list of such establishments. So they stopped every 10th person who came out of the bar and asked whether he or she thought drinking and driving was a serious problem. So identify the population. So in this case, I'm kind of able to identify the population because of that first sentence I wrote. So otherwise, I would have kind of been assuming who they were generalizing to. Who are they hoping to say is the ones that they are talking about? And so I think they're talking about adults. And I guess this would be United States or whatever. So they're making generalization to adults. Now, part B says, identify the population parameter of interest. So here I gave you some little hints here. It says, so I'm asking, what is the information that you are going to be figuring out about the subjects? So in this case, especially since this first sentence has a proportion here, I think that we're going to be figuring out that we are hoping to see what proportion of adults think drinking and driving is a serious problem. Okay, so that is what our goal is to figure out what proportion of the adult population think drinking and driving is a serious problem. And I kind of figured that out because this is what they were asking the people when they came out of the bar. So now, look at this. We haven't talked about sampling frame. Identify the sampling frame. And so I defined it for you. That is the items from which the subjects of the sample will be extracted. Okay, so let's see. What does that mean? So like, what group are you looking at that your sample comes from? If you're trying to estimate all adults, well, you're not looking at all adults. In this case, they narrowed it down to people coming out of the bar. So that is like who they're actually looking at is the adults coming out of the bar. Okay, so even though we're generalizing to all adults, we're not looking at all adults. We're just going to look at them, but then who actually is the sample made up from? And that is coming from every, what is the actual sample made from? And that is every 10th person coming out of the bar. Okay, so there's kind of the difference. Sampling frame is larger than sample. It's like who you actually look at. Your population may be all sports fans, but you just randomly selected one sports arena, and that's your sampling frame, and then you randomly selected from some people from that arena, and that would be your sample. All right, Identify the sampling method, including whether or not randomness was employed. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Sampling method. Phew, I'm lucky on this one because it says every 10th person, so bam, I know that this is systematic sampling. So, as I talked about in the notes today, you may not be able, there could be options. You know, I've talked about a couple examples where it could be this kind of or this kind, but pick one and tell me why it's that. Furthermore, I think there are even some of the answers, or some of the times these problems, like I think even number 2, I think it doesn't clarify and say which method they used. So I think the sampling method was unclear. They didn't state it. Okay, now whether or not randomness was employed. So on this randomness idea, we don't know. Did they say they started with a random person? They stopped it just says they stopped. Oh, yeah. They had randomly selected. Okay, I'm reading up here. They randomly selected from a list. Oh, wait. Well, they did randomly select the bar, but we don't know that the first person was randomly selected. So I'm going to say here, we don't know. They didn't give us enough information. If the first person selected was randomly chosen. You know, they could have said, okay, people are going to start coming out. The 32nd person is going to be where we start. We don't know if the first person was randomly selected, so we do not know if randomness was employed. All right, identify any potential sources of bias that you think can be happening and problems you see to generalizing to the population that they want to generalize to. So I'm pretty much thinking standing outside a bar asking people about drinking and driving is a problem. So, you know, I'm thinking that, so I would call this bias under coverage because bar goers are definitely not representative of all adults. Bar goers are not representative, especially in the opinion about drinking and driving, representative of all adults. And so therefore, you know, it was a convenience sampling. So if you think about this problem here, in summary, if all they were wanting to do was generalize to people, they would have the right to generalize to all adult bar goers. They could do that. They could generalize to bar goers. But they do not have the right to generalize to just all adults. If all they were doing was going to make a statement about people that go into bars, then this could be an opinion for those people, not all adults. And so if your population was all bar goers, then that would be appropriate. All right, so that's that. So your number 2 is going to be the same kind of things, but then once you do number 3, you're going to read a situation, tell me what the sampling method is, and then if you see any bias happened because of that, maybe you think it was a good method and didn't have any type of bias. And same thing here, then you're going to kind of decide what was their sampling method and maybe what's the problem with the way that they proposed or that method they proposed. Again, they're asking for what kind of sample is this? Is it likely to be representative? Oh, here's that sampling frame. Remember, that's who you actually can reach and pull from. And then this was about a playground. Okay, keep in mind who is going to the playground. If they're worried about it being in need of repair, keep this in mind. Are people that think it needs repair, are they going to actually be at the park? They might not be using that park. And so keep that in mind. So I'm just going to kind of leave it that there for you and see what you can come up with on the rest of those problems. And so there you go. There's your Chapter 12 homework help.